that God tests no soul beyond its capacity. The Quran also says that when we enter the next life, when we arise in the next life, it often compares it to the way we awaken from a dream. It talks about the illusory character of life. It says life is just pomp and illusion. It shows that when the believers arise on the day of judgment and they're asked, how long have you suffered there on earth? They'll say, did we suffer there an hour? Or a day? Or less than that? And those who really know, it says in the Quran, will tell you, you suffered there but little, if you only knew. For a short time, if you only knew. So the Quran, in many, many verses, talks about the illusory character of life. In one verse, it explicitly compares the person the way a person is resurrected on the day of judgment, and the way a person awakens from a dream. When it talks about the day of judgment and when people enter the next life, it says how they come out of their sleeping chambers, how they will swoon and be groggy, how their vision will first be blurred like the way you awaken from a dream, and then it'll become sharp and they'll see the reality. It says that people will, sort of stumble like the way you stumble out of bed in the morning, and then, rush to where they are determined to go, where they ultimately will have to go, and so forth. The images in the Quran, and I believe they're symbolic because it's talking about the day of judgment, something beyond this perception, indicate, and there are explicit statements that indicate, that this life, as real as it seems to us, and it is real, will seem when we enter to the next life very much like a dream, like awakening, say, for example, from a dream or a nightmare. So that all the suffering we went through, all the pain we went through, all the agony we went through will suddenly seem like it's just a distant and vague, harmless memory. Are you following me? Because, when you're living in a nightmare, when you're having a nightmare at night, and you're living it, and your heart is beating 1,000 beats a minute, and you're suffering through that nightmare, and you're in a panic, and etc., and you awaken from that nightmare, and suddenly you're still nervous, and then you realize you're awake, and you're in the greater reality, and you say to yourself, oh my God, it was only a nightmare, it was only an illusion, it was only a dream. The Quran indicates that when we awaken in the next life, our experience will be very similar. All the pain, all the hardship, all the agony will just seem like it was a brief, momentary illusion. Even though it was very real, even though it shaped what type of creature we enter, what type of being we enter the next life as, all the suffering, all the agony that we went through will be erased. There's a famous saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that says that when a believer puts his steps into heaven, and he's asked to recall all the suffering that he's gone through on earth, he'll not remember any of it. And when a rejecter of God steps into what faces him in the next life, and is asked to recall all the joys and indulgences and the things he pursued and he enjoyed in this life, he will not be able to recall any of it either. So, in both cases, it'll seem like a distant, vague event. But for those whose balance of goodness is heavy, to use a Quranic terminology, in the next life, when they enter that next life, all the suffering they went through will seem very inconsequential, like awakening from a dream in this life. So that's one thing you have to remember, that regardless of who you are, whatever agony you're going through, right now it seems like there's these great differentials and things like that, but when we enter the next life, it's all going to seem relatively insignificant to all of us. It's all going to seem insignificant to all of us. The second thing you have to remember is that the Quran does tell us that we do face tests in this life. That God does manipulate the human situation, puts us into situations where we're forced to face sometimes hardship, sometimes ease, sometimes we're forced into making critical moral choices. He definitely manipulates the human drama. But he leaves the critical choices up to us. And he said such things like sometimes he brings suffering on those who reject faith so that perhaps they'll use their reason, or so that perhaps they will recall, or so that perhaps they will reflect on their situation. It also says sometimes he brings ease upon them and drowns them in what they're pursuing, drowns them in their lustful pursuits, drowns them in their material pursuits, hopefully so that they'll realize the purposelessness of it, the aimlessness of it, the agony of it, the chaos of it. Again, so that perhaps they will reflect. But regardless of whether you're good or bad, the Quran guarantees it. You will definitely suffer. Because this life, you are going to face adversity, because through adversity, you grow.